welcome you guys to another episode of The Common Theory. I'm your host, Chris, along with my man, Dallas. We are excited. We have a fantastic topic today, and we are going to be talking about the upcoming event at RIW Hobbies, the 1K that is going to be on June 24th. So it is right here, right around the corner, a little less than 1 month away, and I'm very excited to bring up a lot of topics about the event as a whole. Dallas, what do you got for us today, my man?
To start things off, we kind of want to touch on, before we talk about going into this new tournament, we haven't discussed too much the previous tournament that just happened, the online Sanctuary Series tournament. So we want to talk about that tournament and how some of those results might affect this upcoming tournament.
Yeah, kind of like the fallout of like all these people, like just what decks showed up, like what were a little bit more dominant and things of that nature.
So yeah, as the winner of the tournament, maybe you want to talk about how things might be looking for your deck, Abdel.
I mean, yeah, Abdel. Well, I mean, I was the lonely Abdel guy, right? But I think Abdel is pretty well positioned currently still. One of the most difficult matches that deck has is, ironically, is TPI. That deck is it, I would say, actually, in general. Actually, Malcolm has a fantastic match. It's faster, it's lower to the ground, it's easier to assemble. So a lot of those is it style decks are incredibly well positioned against Abdel. But I will say a lot of the main decks that did show up at that event all kind of fall to similar cards, which I think is very important coming into this newer meta that we're going to be seeing at the upcoming event. Kind of what I mean by that, Dallas, which I think you know what I'm getting at, is that Abdel has a lot of tokens, TPI has a lot of tokens, Gut has a lot of tokens, Gretchen has these smaller little 1/1s and 1/2s, land and tappers. A lot of these are getting smacked by cards like Fiery Cannonade, Trickery, and things of that nature. What do you think about that, man? Do you think that people are finally going to start sleeving up these cards at this upcoming event?
I mean, I think you absolutely have to bring Fiery Cannonade and Dragon Breath. I think those cards are just really good, being able to deal
Breath
two to the
weapon,
board.
breath
Or
weapon,
Breath Weapon,
Dallas.
not Dragon Breath.
I do the same thing all the time.
Correct. Very different cards.
Dargo lives, man. Dargo
Yeah,
lives.
Dargo will still play Dragon Breath. But yeah, Fiery Cannonade and Breath Weapon to deal with all the two butt creatures. A lot of, as we move towards these faster games, people are obviously more inclined to lower their mana curve, play smaller creatures that they can deploy earlier, and that means that these board wipes are only going to deal with more things as the tournament meta tries to speed up. Malcolm can't survive a breath weapon. All the untappers for Gretchen, as you mentioned, all these 1/1 tokens. So yeah, I think the 2 damage board wipes are definitely good. The 1 damage board wipes, obviously less good, half the damage. They deal with a lot fewer things. Gut with Inspiring Leader in play. It doesn't deal with any of those skeleton tokens at that point. Doesn't deal with Malcolm. Doesn't deal with some of that stuff. But it will still deal with those decks like Abdel and TPI, where they just happen to make a bunch of 1/1s, which is still worth something. But I'd be inclined to lean away from the 1 damage board wipes for now, at least.
Yeah, they're still, they have their merit, right? Like that's the kind of like the thing. I think you're able to work with an opponent that has the electricity, right? And maybe you have to work with the gut player, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So you're going to partner up with somebody to make sure you get that Abdel player dead, right? You're gonna be like, look, I can't get through this wall. You have the electricity. You blast it away. I one shot them. They're gone. Me and you now duke it out, right? Like this is where we need to be, because if we don't do this, we both just lose right now. So I don't think it's wrong of us to make deals and things of that nature. But the other part of the Fallout that I think we have to bring up, right, is Black. Where has Black been? Um, can Black show up here? And just like we were saying, Black has Crypt Rats, it has Pestilence. We have a lot of very, very powerful board wipes, but something you actually just said a few seconds ago, which I think is very relevant. You said lower to the ground. Our mana costs are going to be dropping. Pestilence and cards of that nature, like Evan's Car's Justice, cards like that, they're 4 mana. I've found them historically to be a lot to ask for. Now, more so Pestilence than Evan Car's Justice, because at least it's right then and there where I'm getting to Wrath for 2, right? Pestilence, you can't ever curve out, right? If we slam Pestilence on 4, if we live through that, wow, what a game. Like, what a game we're playing. So, what do you think about that?
I think with Pestilence, it's kind of interesting because I think it really depends on the pod. If you're playing against 3 combo decks, you're probably not going to die for playing a Pestilence, but it's definitely possible that your Pestilence just gets bounced and you just spent 4 mana to do absolutely nothing unless you had the extra mana to activate it.
The time
If you have
walking.
the mana to act,
Yeah, that time walk is so
yeah,
relevant, right? That's something a lot of people forget. The bounce effects during competitive play with all these blue decks running around, there's so much bounce, and you get time walked, and it is, oh, it's such a feel bad. The first time somebody did that to me was against Scholar of the Ages, where I was playing against an individual in our community called Corrigan, and that said individual into the royal of my pestilence on curve, and I was like, oh, oh, what a tempo play.
yeah, it's definitely feel bad whenever Pestilence gets bounced, especially if they time it because you had extra open mana, so they try to time it to force you to activate it at awkward times. Things of that nature can be pretty difficult. And against super aggressive decks, like a deck with Dargo in the command zone, they're probably either just going to punch you or try to get you low enough to where your pestilence won't be as effective, to where you can't pestilence for 5 to kill the Dargo because you're at 5 or less life, or there's some other big threat, all that kind of jazz, or you'll lose your pestilence because there's nothing in play. I still really like Crypt Rats. Being 3 mana is nice. Not having that extra black pip in the cost means you get at least 1 extra mana for activation if you're playing them on the same turn. Theoretically, it's also a blocker, which is nice in some of those scenarios. You can get it back with cards like Unearth, all these small things. And we'll talk about Crypt Rats specifically a bit more in Deck Tech. Spoiler. I think black is still a very good color. I think one of the major reasons no one brought a black deck was just because there were only 16 players at the Sanctuary. So I'd expect to see at least 1 black deck, but probably more.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I do think it was said a little bit in the community that Black historically has had trouble closing a game, and it's not that it can't win; it's just it takes a long time to win. So historically, it was can't win. I don't think is said correctly, but the decks can win for sure, 110%. It's just they take a long time, and with the 90-minute clock, that does make certain strategies a little bit more difficult to pilot. So,
Yeah, a lot of their classic win conditions from old CPDH were cards like Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Cranial Plating, Crypt Rats, and just getting Crypt Rats back, like looping Grey Merchant and Crypt Rats, things of that nature.
Oh
just
yeah.
that slow burn and just controlling the board while doing it is kind of the classic black win condition in CPDH, and it can just be a bit slow in tournament play or too reliant on being able to have all the answers all the time. So it can struggle, but there are certain commanders that kind of help deal with that, like one we've talked about before, Loyal Subordinate,
Oh
just
yeah,
giving
definitely.
you that clock in the command zone.
I mean that card specifically makes people pull their hair out, right? Like I've seen people play against that and their heads are like, uh, w- uh, eh, uh, that card's not that good, blah, and they kind of ignore it, and then 3 turns later they're like, why am I about to die? They're just confused because they didn't realize what was happening, and so I'm a big fan of that card for sure. But so keep going on the Fallout plane here of like the event and everything. If I had a deck of choice, now this is not what I'm playing in the event, but if I had a deck of choice, what I think would be at like the top of the line for an event in this open meta, I think I'm leaning into something like Malcolm Kedis, like or Malcolm Breaches. Like decks like that are so tried and true, and are they not just answering every single thing we're looking for? Like, so we need Wraths. We could play Breath Weapon. It won't kill our breaches, right? We could play Fiery Cannonade. Won't kill our Malcolm. We could play like Trickery. Like, what are we missing in a deck like that? That we have our counter spells too. Like, and we could combo off on turn 3 or 4. Like, what else do you need?
Yeah, so Malcolm obviously is a deck that can be very fast, gets to play a lot of those Izzet control spells, gets to play counter spells. It can struggle against those super value oriented combo decks like the Simic decks. It can struggle against sometimes, depending on what your hand is. And it can struggle against decks like Dargo Kelith, where once the Dargo is in play, it has 2 protection spells at any given time that can be dedicated towards it. One thing that Malcolm specifically can struggle with is whenever there are 1 or 2 aggro decks at the table, even if they don't focus the Malcolm deck, if they take out another player, Malcolm loses value if you're on the Curiosity plan, or if you have Kedis in your command zone with Malcolm, you're getting fewer treasures. A lot of those game plans specifically don't do as well if aggro players are killing other players, even. So, is it Malcolm can struggle against some of the grindy combo decks, like Simic combo decks, just because it can struggle to actually outvalue them in the mid to late game, whereas it does present those early wins still. So it can still try to win under them, but it can struggle if it gets to that late game against decks like Tatiova or Gretchen. It
Hmm.
can also struggle at tables with multiple or even a single aggro deck that is taking out other players, because sometimes, more often than not, I'd say, Malcolm plus red decks are on a curiosity game plan, and losing an opponent means a lost card draw every time you would get a curiosity ping. Or if you have Kedis in your command zone, that's 1 fewer treasure every time Malcolm connects. Things of that sort. So you lose some value there too. So it can struggle at those pods, but in general, the deck is fast enough, consistent, and can play for that mid to late game with a suite of Izzet removal that I still think it's always a strong pick.
Yeah, that deck is just very very powerful. Just overall, I would never disregard sitting across from a Malcolm deck, especially the Is It Malcolm deck. That's just a deck that's just like, oh, here we go, like mulligan appropriately or lose. It's kind of the way I look at that deck. Um, so let's jump into the next topic, man. We I think we covered a lot of the fallout from the event pretty well. Let's move to our deck of the week, and that's on you this week, my man. What do you got for us?
Well, as you guys know, it is a black deck. Today we're talking about Vizkopa Guildmage in the command zone, a commander that is very mana hungry in a lot of instances where you want to activate both of its abilities, as they both cost 3 mana total and both have white and black pips in them.
Wait, did you say
So,
play rituals? Is that what you said? I'm sorry. I needed to clear my ears out there. You said play rituals. I think you're breaking up here. We might be not able to hear you now.
I I do have a variant of my own that plays rituals. I don't think the standard builds that I've seen usually play it. Usually they go for just the big mana route with mana rocks that are 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 mana. I'm not a big fan of the 4 mana rocks personally, but I can see going for 2 and 3 mana rocks and just trying to build up that big burst turn on like turn 7 and just controlling the board until then, because you are in Orzhov, so you have a lot of control options. You also get some really strong anti-meta options, the likes of which we've already discussed to some extent. You get Suture Priest and Bloodseeker to deal with TPI and Abdel and Gut and any
Those are
deck
like the
that's just
twins, right?
pumping out to.
Like they're like the twins, aren't they? Like if you're playing white and black, why are you not playing them? They just cold turkey a flicker deck, right? Like if you have any means of protection or recursion, they don't get removed. The flicker deck is just done, which I think is kind of funny. The irony about that is some of the flicker decks can play
Yeah,
Suture
and
Priests themselves.
yep, Abdel moment. But
Yep.
yeah, especially just these cards in partnership with the Soul Sister cards, like Soul Warden, Soul's Attendant,
Yep. That's
and Soul
nope.
Sister.
Yeah, that's the Soul Sisters.
Um,
I mean, you got Lunark Veteran in
yep,
there too, right? But like that's only for you. That's not for everybody.
yeah, yeah, because especially if there is like an Abdel or a TPI at your table, and you have a Soul Sister effect in play, you can activate this scope on their turn and just like completely drain people. But they're just good value at padding your life total against the aggro decks as well over time. There are also some other really nasty pieces that Viscopa gets, like taking advantage of Crypt Rats in general. If you're able to give Crypt Rats lifelink, it kind of becomes a combo on its own. So if your Crypt Rats has lifelink, and then you activate the effect where whenever you gain life, your opponents lose that much, even if at bare minimum you activate your Crypt Rats for 1, it hits itself, the Viscopa, and 4 players. So that's 6 damage, which means your opponents have all taken 1, and you gain 6, and then they'll all take 6. So at minimum, 1 mana equals 7 damage to all of your opponents, which is pretty decent. And that scales with any creatures that are in play or pumping additional mana into that. If you can give Crypt Rats lifelink, it's going to be very strong, especially if there's an Eternal Thirst on your Crypt Rats and you're able to
Oh yeah.
get a counter on it early, and then just keep your Crypt Rats alive as you repeatedly just do this throughout the game. There are just so many pieces that are already strong that Viscopa Guildmage is really able to amplify and help give you a win condition in Orzhov in the command zone to really help you push for game, push for lethal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, man. You mind if I throw a little bit of my 2 cents at you and you let me know what you think of this one? But
Absolutely.
Well, first off, I gotta kind of piggyback of what you're saying. I really like that, like the crypt rat plan that you're talking about, because it's at worst, right, is what you said, and that's just the floor. And it only scales up from there, which is great, especially in the current meta with all these tokens. Could you imagine if Abdel flickered like one time and has 10 tokens? That's it. The game ends right there. The game is over. So there's a lot of really like great synergies and really great potential just overall with that. But I wanted to bring up a Rebel package. So overall, the Rebels have been kind of ignored over a little while, and there's only a few people in the community that are currently playing them. But I absolutely love them. And in a deck like this, I think you could get away with playing the Rebels. So I'm just gonna hit you with one of them, which is Defiant Falcon, because they're all kind of generic. They all do the same similar thing. You just pay 4 mana, tap it, you search your library for one less mana for whatever you paid into it. So this one's 4. So searches with for converted mana costs 3 or less, and it puts it directly into play. That the key with all of these different rebels that we have is the one we're specifically in this deck we're looking for is Children of Corliss, which is just a 1 mana 1/1 cleric that lets you pop it and regain all the life you lost. Which, once again, that Crypt Rat, if you shoot yourself for 4, you just gain your 4 life back. Or if Gut slams into you for 14 damage, 16 damage, 20 damage, you pop it, it at least gives you that I gain all my life back, your attack was worthless. But once again, if you have your commander, they can't hit you. They have to not hit you. If they hit you, everyone loses. So you kind of build like this wall that they can't get through or don't want to. So they have to remove that little Children of Corliss. Or once again, these rebels get it at instant speed, which I think is very important because they might not see it coming. These rebels are like so far off of people's radar that you're gonna tutor and they're gonna be like, okay, sure, doesn't matter, you're dead. And then you slam a Children of Corliss and their brains are gonna explode because they have no idea what that was, right? So, what do you think about those? Are you kind of on board, or you're not really?
No, Children of Corliss is an amazing card in Viscopa, especially if you go all in on Children of Corliss, you can win the game with this card on turn 4. If you just have the Children of Corliss and a way to pay life as you choose in play, and then you just cast your commander, activate your commander after you've paid 29 life, gain it all back, shoot everybody for 29, punch them with your creatures,
Yep.
and just kind of win. But even without that, with the Rebel package, the nice thing is that your Defiant Falcon or any other Rebel tutor you have makes your Children of Corliss uncounterable if you're able to activate that. They just come into play. Can't counter it, and once it's in play,
Yep.
you can remove it, I guess, like before damage is dealt. So it can still be dealt with, but still having an uncounterable way to put a win condition into play is always going to be worth something at least.
Oh yeah. But so I will say the negative thing about a deck like this is that the aggro decks will have to look at you. They can't ignore you, right? Let's be honest. If you sit down across a Dargo player and you're the Orzhov player, they're gonna look at you and be like, you know, I have to kill you first, right? Like you're gonna gain 1,000,000 life, and I'm not gonna be able to kill you, right? Or you're just gonna kill my Dargo 14 times, and I'm not gonna be able to ever hit you. So looks like we have to go toe to toe here, which I think is relevant for the event because if aggro does show up, it will be in like that quantity of like the Dargos and things of that nature, which are very smash your face in by turn 4, right? Turn 5, turn 6, right? You're just
Yeah.
getting nuked.
Especially in the cases where it's like you're playing a good amount of removal because you're Orzhov, and that's how you're going to deal with combo decks. But that also means that the aggro decks, especially something like Dargo, where their win condition is this one card in their command zone, if it comes down to a 1v1 between the Scopa Guildmage and Dargo, it's going to be hard for Dargo to win because it's just going to be getting removed repeatedly. Unless
Yeah.
you have something like a Dragon Breath in the graveyard to give you haste every turn, things of that nature. It's just going to be so much more difficult for Dargo to punch through consistently.
But as we saw from that from the last event, right? The Dargo Kel's deck is Words of Wisdom of Alcatron. It will just yeet you out of the game. You're the player they don't like. All of a sudden, turn 4 rolls around and you have left the building, right? You're just like, well, I guess I'm dead. And then the Dargo Kellis player plays the game for another 45 minutes. And it is relevant that you do have to know that you may be painting a bullseye on yourself.
Yeah, still play your early game removal.
Yes. Snuff out.
It's a
Snuff
competitive
out.
deck.
Snuff out. You gained life. Play the snuff out, please. Play
Yeah,
the
this is a
snuff
deck
out.
where Snuff Out is truly free.
Yeah, definitely. We can't talk enough about how good snuff out is here. But I think that's all for the deck of the week. So this was one where we didn't really need to sell each other on either of it. Were in agreement prior to doing this, and yeah, I really would love to start seeing this deck running around. I think it'd be very healthy for the meta. It is a black deck that can win rather quickly, so very excited to see if it shows up. But moving on to our last topic of today, what we think the new meta is going to look like now that Abdel is kind of running a bit free, to say. So, Dallas, hit us off, my man. What do you think? Where do you think we're going?
So there has been a lot more talk about Abdel since the Sanctuary tournament, which is to be expected. No matter how small the tournament is, our community is small enough that any event that's broadcasted or anything of that sort, there's going to be some talk about it.
Oh yeah.
So there's going to be some deck choices against Abdel for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if some people have been trying to pick up Abdel. I think Gretchen, since there were 4 that showed up, I'm not sure if that means that people are going to prepare more against that, or if people are going to see that 4 showed up and 1 made top cut and assume that that's bad and think Gretchen is just a bad deck and not prepare for it at all. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I would assume that since 4 showed up, you would still prepare for it.
You know we have to talk about that, right? Remember right before our last video, we were like, yeah, Gretchen's not going to show up. We don't think it is. It's going to be Tatiova, and then Tatiova never showed up. We were wrong. We were very wrong.
Yeah. I thought no one was listening to me preach about the gospel of Gretchen, but apparently people were.
Yep.
So that was a surprise to me. A pleasant surprise. I'm sure at least one Gretchen will show up to this event. I'd assume at least one Tatiova will show up. I'm just always going to assume at least one Tatiova is going to show up until it doesn't happen for like 5 events in a row.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assumption, right? Because Tatiova is kind of like one of those old school decks, like somebody that hasn't played our format for a long time just is like, oh, look, I forgot I have my Tatiova deck. Let me wipe the dust off of it and bring it to the event. Just to play.
There's definitely going to be Malcolm. There's definitely going to be some Dargo. Probably going to be some Gut. I'm interested to see what rogue decks show up because this event sounds like it's going to be big. A lot of prominent members in the community are going, and I would expect most of the prominent members to be bringing some more standardized decks like Abdel or Malcolm or Simic combo, things of that sort. So I'm interested to see if some other people follow suit with that, or if they
Hmm.
bring some rogue decks, like how we saw Finn the Fangbearer in the
Yeah.
last tournament.
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting your feet wet, right? Like, I do believe that there are certain decks that may not cut it, but without you bringing it, you really don't truly know, right? Maybe you have like an insane matchup against certain decks, and you might just like plow through them, let's be honest. Like, so I really do think you should be bringing these kinds of decks. Like, there's no reason to not. I would highly suggest it. So, but speaking of meta, I really so one deck that kind of like ruffled some feathers was that Dargo Kelith deck. That was a deck that a lot of people had never seen before, and it was very like whoa, what is this deck doing? And granted, there was only one player playing it, but I think it kind of made enough of a scene to where people have kind of looked at that deck. I'd be very interested to see if more people bring something along those lines, because it's just like you were saying earlier, it has a very powerful game against counter decks. Like, so Dargo gets underneath your counter spells, and it always has two protection spells up. You always have to assume that, as horrible as it sounds. And as horrible as it sounds, they always do, right? Like, me and you have played against the deck enough times to be like, they got it. Don't go after the Dargo. If it looks at you wrong, accept your fate. We've kind of been through that, I
Yeah,
think,
if you think
enough.
it's coming at you, if you think it's coming at you, bounce it on the instep before their turn,
Oh,
just
yeah.
to be safe.
Oh, yeah.
Make them use it over a few turns.
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah,
One deck that I think should start seeing play, and I hope start seeing play, is Scholar of the Ages. I've really loved that deck, and I really would like to start seeing it show up. The problem that deck has, which a lot of members in community have been attempting to resolve, is wow, if the aggro deck looks at you, you cannot stop them from killing you. You're just dead. You have to accept your fate. So I think there's enough mines on the deck though that maybe something could get done with something along those lines. But Ghost Tormod, I'd love to see that deck show up. There's a few other lists that I'd really love to see if they start making an entrance. Armix decks. I do believe Armix X decks, any Armix variant, does have a little bit of an issue with time constraints. So maybe if we have a dedicated pilot over the years that knows the deck well, they would be able to get there.
yeah, I think Armix is an insane card. That card's so strong, but it really takes great, near perfect threat assessment to play Armix decks well. It's got so many nuances that it's just so difficult to pilot, but I think Armix is great. I think Demir decks in general is something I want to see some innovation and some spice coming into this tournament. Trying to find ways to actually close out those games. As far as I know, the only like super combo heavy Demir decks are like Disciple of Deceit and Vol with a black background.
Hmm.
And I think those can close out. They at least have like a combo win condition that they're actively working towards. And
Well,
Demir gets like all of the transmute tutors.
we have Vohar too. Vohar, I've seen a few high tide lists and things like that with Vohar, but kind of the
I
lists I've
forgot
seen.
about that card. Haven't seen
Yeah,
him.
yeah. It falls on its face pretty hard. It really depends on certain things, and then like one relic in the deck just goes, yeah, I concede. So it's it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't have a good backup plan, right? Like Abdel, you nuke its yard, it goes, cool, I still have 22 tokens. Like, come at me. So there are certain decks that really have.
And 7 more flickers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so here's a fun one. So we like to discuss a lot of our gameplays and stuff that me and Dallas here play over time. And we actually had a really funny one, and I wanted to bring this up to you guys because I thought it'd be pretty entertaining. So we were playing a game here very recently, and I was just watching, and there was a new Abdel player actually playing my exact list, and wow, was that game hard to watch? No, not trying to talk negatively about the Abdel player. It was the second time they've ever piloted Abdel, but dear Lord, was it so? This like Abdel creates so many triggers. It gets so out of hand, and I would definitely, just like Bobby B Fine did prior to his tournament win with Gretchen, definitely hook up with people that play these decks like Gut Leader and things of that nature, and touch base with them before you decide to go to this event. Because if you don't know how to order your triggers, wow, do you trip over yourself? Like, at one point, how many triggers were happening in one turn? That was like, I don't know. Can you hit me with a
I
random
think there were
number?
like 8 things under Abdel. I think there were 8 things under Abdel and like 3 flicker spells cast.
Yeah.
So,
And none of
and
them
there
could
was a
win the game.
Peregrine Drake in there.
Yeah. but
Yeah.
and none could
Uh,
win the game because there was an active Tormod script. So it was just churning through the churning. Like, dear Lord, was it just, oh, this was just so
yeah.
hard to watch. But definitely learn your deck. If you know your deck, you will be much better. A pilot that knows Gretchen or a pilot that knows their Malcolm list will be much stronger. So don't just try to pick up like the best stack. Let's just say you're, I don't know, a Rocco player, right? There's very few Rocco players in the community. But let's just say you're a Rocco player. You've played it 1,000 times, but you don't think it's fitted very well for the event. I would still tell you to play Rocco because you've played it 1,000 times and you'll know it better and you know the matches better instead of just dropping it and picking up something random like Abdel, because then you're just going to trip over yourself and not get there.
Especially with Rocco specifically, but with any deck, if you think it's going to struggle with the meta, then instead of just changing decks, you can try to find some tech cards that still function within your deck. Like for Rocco, it's absurdly easy because he's the toolbox tutor commander in 3 colors, right? So you've
Oh yeah.
got so many tech options. If you want to play Suture Priest, tutor your Suture Priest if you have to. If you're at a table with Abdel and Third Path Iconoclast, tutor the Suture Priest, call it a day.
Yeah, that would be
But
sick.
even for other decks, like there are tech cards.
I mean,
There are tech cards that
you
you can
even
find.
get the third sister. You get the Essence Warden in Rocco. I mean, Rocco's a pretty sweet deck. It's just it's not as fast and it's still susceptible to all the hate spells, right? Like it's you don't want to sit down across from an electric where you playing Rocco, right? That kills your Soul Sisters. That kills your Dorks. Yet, I mean, you're feeling really bad after an electricity. So, I'm not saying to play Rocco, guys. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah,
but
but another thing that I want to talk about for deck choices is play your free spells, guys.
oh,
After this last tournament, like
yes,
we've proven that the format is fast enough, I think, to justify paying for life to cast Snuff Out, right? Or sacrificing a mountain for Thunderclap or Mind Collapse. That one's a bit rough sometimes because it's only free on your turn.
I mean it nukes a
But
Dargo though. It nukes a
still,
Dargo. It's
yeah,
so good.
like it Daze counters Dargo on turn 2. It's great. Try
Yep.
it at least, you know? Like, whenever everyone's playing these turbo, go fast, go hard, I'm gonna tap out every turn decks to try to win. Cards like Daze put in so much more work than you might think they do.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that, man. That is a really good closer for us because realistically, um, I'm sure you've spoken to a few of my opponents and stuff from the event, and literally my half the games I won, actually, three of those games were like, guys, did you tap out? They're like, yep. I'm like, cool. Win the game, and they're like, oh. I'm like, no free spells. Like a daze would have stopped this. They're like, no daze. I'm like, cool. That was easy. Thunderclap? No? Wow. Guess I get there. So I agree. I'm playing the Thunderclaps, guys. I'm playing the free spells too. Trust me, it's worth it.
What's the one? What's the one Ryan likes? Spinning Darkness? Is that what it's called? The
Oh
black one?
yeah. Oh yeah. That card's insane. That card's
Like
great. The card's good.
so many free spells at common. It's
Yep.
insane.
Yep.
Look for
Snapback.
them.
Snapback stops combos. Like snapback will do it, right? Go to freed. I'm tapped out. Snapback your target. Got him. Like there's so many free spells in our format to get overlooked because it's not efficient or it's you're losing card advantage or I don't know what everybody says about them, but they're good. They're good, guys. Trust us. They're good. I agree with the free spells. I yes, preach, preach. Keep it going. I love them. I love them. I love them. So.
Alrighty, we good to close out then?
Oh yeah, my man. That was a. I think everybody will enjoy what we have for him this week. So definitely catch us next week, guys, and let's close this out there, Dallas.
Ready. Thank you everybody for watching. Hope you all have a great day. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're not already. Leave a comment letting us know what kind of decks and meta calls you think might be showing up or what you're gonna play.